Relationships with our donors. Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the fundraising school, and I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Susan Perry, Major Gift Officer at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and Dr. Patrick Dwyer, member of our faculty and a nationally regarded researcher for his work in the philanthropic sector. Susan, great to have you back with us on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
And Patrick, great to see you again as well.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Susan and Patrick have co-authored Chapter 17 in Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, the 5th edition, which came out in 2022, Integrating Principles of Donor Relations. And, Susan, you're an experienced major gift officer and fundraiser. Why are donor relationships so important?
I think we all touch upon that. Donor relations are so important with the donor is because we need to tell them that we are truly thankful for their gift. We need to tell them that we are stewarding their gift and that we can really make a difference with what they are entrusting us to use with the monies they've given to us. And I think we can see that in many different examples that we have touched upon in the chapter. We talk about how a major donor tells us that a person gives a gift and then they don't hear from the organization until after that gift is accepted and the next campaign rolls around. So I think stewardship and donor relations are very important to the organization.
Susan, in your answer, what I'm hearing is we can't be looking at the donor as a name in our portfolio with a gift range next to that name, that we're really approaching these people as people with human dignity. We're reaching into some of their strongest values and their strongest motivations. And if I'm understanding you correctly, that's the caretaking of fundraising as we're approaching people for charitable contributions.
That is exactly right, Bill. A lot of times major gift officers or development officers will make a relationship with that particular donor. And therefore, it kind of carries through that relationship for the whole term of whatever that may be for the donor. So we want to make sure that we care about this donor, not just on the basis of a donor to the organization, but also someone who truly is invested in the organization.
Really a deep personal relationship in that donor relationship with the fundraiser and the nonprofit organization. And one aspect of that relationship is expressing gratitude, how we express gratitude, when we express gratitude. And that's one of the many areas of expertise that Patrick Dwyer brings to the table. And Patrick, what does your research show that fundraisers need to apply in terms of gratitude as part of donor relations?
Sure. So gratitude is very important for relationships. So that's something we know from a lot of research in psychology, although not necessarily looking at fundraising relationships. And so what I've tried to do is kind of base some of my work on looking at gratitude and its role in fundraising relationships specifically. And one reason I think that's important is because, so it might be surprising to hear, but donors aren't always thanked. And when they are thanked, they're not necessarily thanked effectively. And so one thing that my work has looked at is kind of the quality of gratitude expressions and how different types of ways of saying thank you might be more or less effective at cultivating relationships with donors and promoting future giving. And so two kind of flavors on that in terms of quality of an expression, what that might look like are more donor-centric or donor-oriented expressions focused on the donor, their characteristics, the fact that they're very generous. They might be always doing kind things like this for the organization. The fact they might have gone out of their way to really help the organization during a tough time. But then we can also say thank you in other ways. So, for example, in a way that's more focused on beneficiaries, so the people who are ultimately benefiting from the gift. And so in one set of studies that I did, we looked at alumni donors. And so one message that we sent to some donors was a thank you message focused on the donor, their characteristics. And the other was focused more on students and students who benefited from those gifts and how much they get out of the gift in terms of their college experience. And what we found, which was kind of surprising to us, but some other past research on gratitude and relationships did point to this, but just surprising from a personal kind of perspective, was that it was actually the donor-focused messages that were more effective. So we looked at who gave over the next several months, and those donors who had received the donor-focused message actually ended up being more likely to give and those who receive the more beneficiary-oriented message. So one take-home message from that research is really the importance of donor-focused communications, but then specifically donor-focused expressions of gratitude, and thinking about the quality of expressions of thanks and how they might resonate differently with donors.
Making sure that we're expressing gratitude after the gift, as Patrick mentioned at the beginning of his reply. And then also, even though donors are interested in impact, they're still interested in those donor-focused expressions of gratitude, and it can help them continue their giving to your nonprofit organization. And, Susan, gratitude is just one form of stewardship. Stewardship is staying in touch with our donors in ways that don't always continually ask them for money. Stewardship is also how we approach donors in the first place, with professionalism and great care and great intentionality. Why is stewardship important, and what examples have you seen have worked well in your career?
Oh my gosh, stewardship is just the basis of everything that we do in the major gift department. Stewardship means that we are really taking care of that donor, that we are extending a hand in many, many situations that may not be asking for a gift, such as sending a birthday card or following up with someone who may be ill, or helping them with a particular organization that they are on the board or need the support. And so stewardship in my portfolio is a top priority. Just to make sure that we are taking care of those donors, that we are stewards of their gifts that they have given to us, and that we are also stewards of the relationships that they entrust us with. So we know everything about a donor as a major gift officer, from the name of their dog to who their children are, where they're going to school, if the grandchildren are coming along. And I think that is what truly makes a major donor in the organization. And also, I have seen from my examples that the more that I supply interest and energy into the stewardship, that there have been larger gifts that have come from that. And I have seen that time and time again, because there's a trust level that the gifts that these particular individuals will give to us, they know that we will protect that, do the best that we can with that, and use it for the best purpose for the organization.
Patrick, as Susan just highlighted so well, stewardship in so many expressions builds trust with the donor. What do you see in the academic literature that fundraisers can apply to their fundraising in terms of building trust, since fundraising happens at the speed of trust?
So trust is just like gratitude, very important for relationships, all kinds of relationships. And some research in psychology has shown that with evidence from experiments, for example. But again, not as much research has looked at trust in a fundraising context. But I think that a lot of these principles of donor relations that we focus on in the chapter, they really function through boosting trust among donors. So the fact that we acknowledge gifts promptly, right? The fact that we express gratitude, the fact that we engage in other kinds of stewardship practices to keep donors connected and engaged, the fact that we try to be transparent and open with donors about our practices, and then accountable as well. All of these things, I think, influence giving and influence relationships through their effect on trust, and helping donors trust the nonprofit and the fundraisers.
Trust so important to our work, Susan, as fundraisers, including during times of crisis. In fact, the most difficult donor to recruit during a time of crisis is the new donor. That donors tend to stay with the organizations with which they are closest. And every chapter in the 5th edition of Achieving Excellence in Fundraising is written with the COVID-19 crisis in mind. Not that COVID-19 continues, but that we'll always have one crisis or another that as fundraisers we're dealing with. How are donor relations important in terms of fundraising before and during times of crisis?
Oh, that's a great question, as we all lived through that period in history. One thing that our shop did was that we kept an open communication with those donors. We weren't asking them for money at that point. We were just telling them what was happening with our organization, what we were doing. Quite a few things we had to pivot, things that we had as top priorities had kind of shifted a little, and then things during COVID, we had top priorities for COVID initiatives as well, such as having a student emergency fund for our school specifically. where students needed things that we never thought they would, such as car payments or things where a family had lost a job during the pandemic. So during this period of time, it's very important to be transparent, as Dr. Dwyer had said, but also keep the communication line open. Keep telling them what we are doing, how we are changing, how we are kind of working through this particular pandemic, and will survive on the end, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. The best time to be fundraising for a time of crisis is before the crisis. Again, treating donors as we should anyway, but deepening those relationships. So when the tough times come, again, donors tend to stay with the nonprofits with which they have the best relationships. And Patrick, this book was also being put together in 2020 and 2021 with the emergence of the so-called twin pandemics, not just COVID-19, but the pandemic around racial justice and reconciliation and racial reckoning. And each chapter has a DEI component written within each chapter. And of course, that's all about human relations, let alone donor relations. So how does this topic of donor relations fit into the very important social movements around diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, so the DEI piece of the chapter was, I think, particularly interesting to think about in the context of crisis situations, and for a couple of reasons. So when a crisis arises, it's often the case that specific communities or social groups are more affected by it, perhaps in a negative fashion. And so I think just recognizing that some donors might be struggling more than others, and perhaps less able to give a gift at that time, is important to recognize. And in fact, some donors might actually be in need, right? So that donors are often recipients of assistance themselves, and so there might be certain communities, who are more affected by different crises. And so I think trying to keep that in mind when approaching different donors is really important. But then at the same time, different members of different groups and communities might have different insights that they can contribute to actually solving the problems that we're dealing with a specific crisis. And so I think engaging members of different communities intentionally, could benefit a nonprofit in actually solving its problems as well.
Our conversation today highlights the strength of Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, the 5th edition, as well as the entire curriculum of the fundraising school. Susan Perry is an accomplished fundraiser, currently major gift officer at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. And Dr. Patrick Dwyer, a psychologist by training, researching into the philanthropic sector, helping us see how the evidence from the research can be translated into effective fundraising practice. And that's what our courses are all about at the Fundraising School. We have more than 20 public courses being offered in person across the United States and online, both recorded and live. We also have custom training in the United States and around the world that we can design specifically for your nonprofit organization, your association, your region, your country, whatever the case might be. We have free quarterly webinars, and of course, these free podcasts that come your way each week through the Fundraising School. And the website is philanthropy.iupui.edu/the Fundraising School. I'm so grateful for our guests today, Susan Perry and Dr. Patrick Dwyer. Our producers today are Dustin Donovan and Mike Anthony. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.